What order you should watch Star Trek, the original series in release order vs. Production order explained. Star Trek, the original series can be viewed in two different orders, but which one is best? With its premiere in 1966, Star Trek, the original series launched a franchise that is still going strong nearly 60 years later. Following the adventures of Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, and his crew aboard the USS Enterprise, Star Trek introduced the world to John Roddenberry's optimistic vision for the future. Captain Kirk, Spock, Leonard Nimoy, and Dr. Leonard McCoy, DeForest Kelley, quickly became a beloved and iconic trio who left their mark on popular culture. Whereas heavily serialized, binge-worthy shows dominate the television landscape today, this was not the case during the 1960s. Television shows of that era were episodic, meaning each episode followed its own self-contained story. Star Trek, the original series, followed this model, making the viewing order ultimately less important than it is for many modern shows. Still, some events throughout the series affect later episodes, and it's interesting to watch how the storylines and characters of Star Trek, the original series, change over time. What makes this somewhat confusing is that NBC did not always air the episodes in the order in which they were produced. Why Star Trek, the original series, has two different viewing orders. The correct way to watch Star Trek, the original series, has long been up for debate. Realistically, most episodes of TOS can be watched in any order, as they tell standalone stories that have few connections to one another. Still, the episodes were, of course, produced in a specific order. When John Roddenberry initially pitched Star Trek, no one was sure whether the show would be successful or not. NBC initially passed on Star Trek's original pilot, The Cage, but allowed the production a chance for a second pilot, which became Where No Man Has Gone Before. Interestingly, Where No Man Has Gone Before was not the first Star Trek episode NBC aired. NBC was responsible for most of the discrepancies between the production order and the order in which the episodes aired. NBC network executives wanted Star Trek to do well, and they sometimes felt that certain episodes would perform better in certain time slots. NBC wanted Star Trek to start off with more action-oriented episodes, for example, to quickly engage the audience and make them want to tune back in. Occasionally, production delays also resulted in episodes not being ready in time, meaning NBC had to air an alternate episode. Arguments can be made for either Star Trek, the original series, production order or release order, but many fans agree that production order is the best. There are several small changes throughout Star Trek, the original series' earliest episodes, that make more sense when viewed in production order. For example, several of the Enterprise crew members are wearing different uniforms in Where No Man Has Gone Before, and Dr. Mark Piper, Paul Fix, is the Starship Enterprise's doctor rather than McCoy. These differences make Where No Man Has Gone Before work better as the first episode than as the third. There are a few other instances of minor things changing between Star Trek's early episodes that make production order work best. As another example, the Corbomite maneuver works better as the first episode to feature Yeoman Janice Rand, Grace Lee Whitney, based on the way Captain Kirk speaks about her. Production order also better illustrates the development of the characters and the ways the series evolved over time. These seemingly small changes make the series flow better. Further, production order is closer to the order John Roddenberry originally envisioned. Watching Star Trek, the original series, in release order is more nostalgic and more convenient. Star Trek, the original series TOS, is a cultural phenomenon that has inspired countless fans, creators, and spin-offs since its debut in 1966. Its combination of thought-provoking storytelling, memorable characters, and its vision of a hopeful future have made it a science fiction classic. However, for newcomers or those revisiting the series, there's a perennial question. In what order should you watch it, release order or production order? Both approaches have their merits, and understanding the differences can help you decide which experience is right for you. Release order. How it was broadcast to audiences. The release order reflects the way episodes aired on television from 1966 to 1969. This is the order audiences of the time experienced the series, complete with its network-imposed quirks. NBC, the network that aired TOS, didn't follow the production order when scheduling episodes. Instead, episodes were shuffled to appeal to ratings or fit specific time slots. For example, the very first episode to air, The Man Trap, was chosen not because it was the pilot or the first produced episode, but because NBC believed it would attract viewers with its Monster of the Week storyline. Meanwhile, Where No Man Has Gone Before, the second pilot produced to sell the series to the network, aired third. Watching TOS in release order allows you to experience the series as audiences in the 1960s did, with all the shifts in tone, character development, and narrative focus intact. For fans who want a historically authentic journey through Star Trek, release order preserves the context of its original broadcast. However, release order has its downsides. Since episodes weren't aired in the sequence they were produced, the show's internal continuity can feel inconsistent. Character relationships and design elements evolve haphazardly. For instance, the uniforms and Spock's makeup change subtly throughout the first season. Watching in release order might make it harder to track these shifts logically. Production order, how it was created. Production order reflects the sequence in which episodes were filmed, providing a behind-the-scenes perspective of how TOS evolved creatively. For example, watching the first season in production order reveals how John Roddenberry and the production team gradually refined the show's look and feel. Starting with The Cage, the original unaired pilot starring Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Christopher Pike, allows viewers to see how Star Trek began. Although The Cage wasn't initially broadcast as part of the series, it's now widely available and often included in box sets or streaming platforms. The second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, introduces William Shatner as Captain James T. Kirk and a more familiar version of the Enterprise crew. Watching this episode early in production order highlights the evolution of key characters like Spock, who appears more emotional compared to his later portrayal as the stoic Vulcan we know. Continuing in production order reveals smoother arcs in character development and world building. For instance, McCoy's presence as Chief Medical Officer and his relationship with Kirk and Spock become more consistent when watched this way. The subtle evolution of the show's themes, from standalone adventures to more morally complex narratives, also becomes clearer. One advantage of production order is that it eliminates some of the jarring tonal and aesthetic shifts caused by NBC's scheduling decisions. If you're interested in seeing how the show was constructed and refined, production order offers a more cohesive experience. Comparing the two orders. To decide between release order and production order, consider what you want from your viewing experience. 1. Historical experience. Release order lets you see the series as its original audience did, with all the quirks of 1960s network television. You'll get the authentic feel of how viewers discovered and fell in love with Star Trek. 2. Creative evolution. Production order gives insight into the show's behind-the-scenes growth. It's an excellent choice for fans curious about how Star Trek developed into the polished series that defined a franchise. 3. Continuity versus nostalgia. If continuity matters to you, production order smooths out inconsistencies in character and story progression. But if nostalgia and historical accuracy are your priority, release order delivers that experience. A third option, a hybrid approach. Some fans advocate for a hybrid approach, blending production and release orders. For example, you could start with The Cage to see the show's origins, then move to release order while skipping episodes out of production sequence that feel too jarring.